That's a great praise song, and I think it captures very well the spirit, the excitement of the triumphal entry as Jesus was ushered into Jerusalem with the crowd traveling to Passover and announcing he is the King. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. The excitement, the thrill of announcing Jesus the King really is a mistake. Well, I understand. I don't think anybody participating was out of bounds in making that mistake. I think it was a very natural mistake, a very normal way to think of a king. They were operating the way any person would operate during their time, the way any person who knew anything of their history would think about a king. Jesus, the king, coming into his capital city, the king ushered by the crowds into his throne. But actually, they were mistaken. Because you see, the Palm Sunday mistake is that Jesus would somehow be king, but he would be king without his death on the cross. It's interesting, in the Gospel of John, if you read in John chapter 12 about the triumphal entry, if you keep reading after verse 19, you'll find Jesus talking with some people saying that a grain of wheat has to go into the ground and die before it comes up new. Jesus was very aware that he was headed for his death, a death, horrible death on the cross. The Palm Sunday mistake is the idea that Jesus can be king without his death on the cross. And that mistake is horribly, horribly wrong. It's important for us to understand that because we need to see that Jesus is the king, not in the typical way that we think of kings. He didn't have a rule over a country. He didn't have a location, a geography about which he ruled. His kingdom was a very different kind of kingdom. His kingdom was the kingdom that God would give him, and it would last forever. It would never be taken away. His kingdom was an invitation to anyone who wanted to come and join him, no matter what their ethnic background, no matter what language they spoke, no matter where they lived. They could be a part of Jesus' kingdom. And to bring that kingdom into reality, this king needed to die. You cannot have Jesus as king without the cross. That's the Palm Sunday mistake. And I think it's important for us to understand how the cross fits into Palm Sunday. As I was thinking about that, I realized there's some verses in Philippians that very specifically address this. Philippians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul talks about Jesus, about his attitude of being a servant, how he laid aside his use, his grabbing on to his divineness. And Jesus is described here in Philippians 2. Paul says, "And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross." You cannot understand Jesus as king without understanding that the cross and Jesus' death on the cross is an essential part of his kingship. Paul goes on, "Therefore, because Jesus was obedient to death, even death on a cross, therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him a name that's above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. You see, Jesus' death on the cross earned him the right to be King of Kings, Lord of Lords, earned him the right to have every knee bow before him. Everyone who's ever lived one day will kneel before King Jesus because of the cross. The people welcoming Jesus into Jerusalem did not understand. They were thinking of him in one kind of kingship, the one that they knew best. But Jesus was coming to be a very different kind of king. A king who would offer himself on the cross, whose death would be the atonement, the price paid for the sinfulness of mankind. And in paying that price, he would open the door that all could be forgiven and that every knee could bow to him, the King who gave himself for his subjects. I want us to think about Palm Sunday and the excitement that Jesus' kingship brought. But I want us to remember that those who brought him into Jerusalem that day did not understand how essential the cross truly was. We too need to understand how essential the cross is. I mentioned that we have extra songs this morning, and I've selected a song by the Gettys. Maybe you've heard it before, The Power of the Cross. Let this message sink into your heart.